For months now, the world has been watching events in the Middle East unfold with growing concern. But what many people still fail to understand is that what we are witnessing today is not simply another regional conflict. This is something far more dangerous. What we are seeing is the collision of strategic miscalculations, political illusions, and military realities that Washington and its allies may not be prepared to face. Because if we strip away the headlines and look carefully at the underlying structure of this conflict, one thing becomes clear. The war with Iran was not an accident. It did not begin overnight. And it certainly did not appear out of nowhere. The truth is that the United States and Israel have been preparing for this possibility for years. Joint military exercises, coordinated intelligence operations, target lists prepared long in advance. From a strategic standpoint, the architecture for this conflict was already in place long before the first missile was launched. But preparation alone does not guarantee success. And in this case, the planners appear to have made several critical mistakes. The first, and perhaps the most important, was a fundamental misunderstanding of Iran itself. In Washington policy circles, there's long been an assumption that the Iranian political system is fragile, that if the leadership were removed, if the command structure were disrupted, if enough pressure were applied, the Islamic Republic would collapse from within. But this assumption reveals something troubling. It shows that many Western planners never truly understood how the Iranian state functions. Iran is not simply a dictatorship built around one man. It is a layered political system with institutions, networks of authority, and deep social roots. It is a republic, as well as a religious state. And when outside forces attempt to destroy it, the reaction is often the opposite of what strategists expect. Instead of rebellion, you get national unity. Instead of protests against the government, you get millions rallying behind it. In other words, the attempt to trigger regime collapse can actually strengthen the regime. That appears to be exactly what is happening now. Which brings us to the second major miscalculation. Military strategy must always serve political objectives. War is not conducted simply for the sake of destroying targets. Every bomb dropped, every missile fired, must be connected to a larger political outcome. In this case, the political objective was clear. Regime change. But if regime change is no longer achievable, then the military campaign loses its purpose. And that creates a dangerous situation. Because once nations commit themselves to war, it becomes extremely difficult to step back, especially when the enemy refuses to surrender. And Iran at this moment shows absolutely no intention of backing down. Instead, Tehran has chosen escalation, massive retaliation, wave after wave of missile strikes. This strategy is designed to exploit one of the fundamental limitations of modern missile defense systems. No system can stop everything. Not Iron Dome, not THAAD, not any interceptor network currently deployed. Missile defense works on percentages. It reduces damage, but it cannot eliminate it. And when large numbers of missiles are launched simultaneously, even advanced defenses begin to struggle. This reality is now forcing Western planners to confront another uncomfortable truth. Modern industrial warfare is not sustained by technology alone. It is sustained by production, factories, supply chains, logistics. Missiles must be replaced. Interceptors must be rebuilt. Stockpiles must be replenished. But over the past several decades, Western defense industries were optimized for something very different. Short wars, limited operations, precision, strikes. What they were not designed for is prolonged, high-intensity conflict against a state capable of producing large numbers of weapons. We already saw signs of this problem during the war in Ukraine. Missile inventories declined. Artillery stocks were depleted. Production struggled to keep pace with consumption. Now imagine that same industrial strain applied to a much larger regional war. The math becomes difficult. And the longer the conflict continues, the worse the imbalance becomes. Which leads to the next question. If air power alone cannot achieve decisive results, what comes next? Historically, wars are not won by bombing alone. They are won by forces on the ground. But here we encounter another serious limitation. Israel's military is already stretched. The United States maintains forces in the region, but most of them are support units, logistics, communications, intelligence. Not large combat formations capable of invading a country the size of Iran. A ground war against Iran would require hundreds of thousands of troops. Mobilization, deployment, months of preparation, and even then success would be far from guaranteed. So, the idea that Iran could simply be overrun is not supported by the military realities on the ground. At this point, the conflict begins to shift towards something even more dangerous: regional escalation. Iran has made it clear that if it faces existential war, it will respond across the entire region. American bases, energy, infrastructure, shipping routes, oil production facilities. All of these become potential targets, and the implications are enormous, because the Persian Gulf is not just another battlefield. It is the central artery of global energy supply. If that artery is cut, the economic consequences would be immediate and severe. Energy markets would explode, supply chains would collapse, and global economic stability would be shaken. But perhaps the most dangerous question of all lies beyond conventional warfare: nuclear weapons. For years, Iran insisted it had no intention of building them. Religious rulings prohibited it. Political leaders rejected it. But wars change calculations. When a nation believes its survival is at stake, the incentives shift dramatically. Technology that once served as deterrence suddenly becomes a potential weapon. And if the nuclear threshold is crossed anywhere in the Middle East, the consequences would not remain confined to the region. Russia would respond. China would respond. Nuclear postures around the world would shift. What begins as a regional conflict could rapidly evolve into something much larger, something global. Which brings us to the uncomfortable conclusion: the greatest danger in war is not always the enemy. Sometimes, the greatest danger is miscalculation. Nations believing they can control events that are already slipping beyond their control. History is full of examples where leaders assumed escalation could be managed, where wars were expected to remain limited, where conflicts believed to be brief became catastrophes. The First World War began under similar illusions. Many believed it would be over in months. Instead, it reshaped the world. Today we face another moment where the consequences of strategic misjudgment could reach far beyond the battlefield. And the question that now confronts policymakers in Washington, Tel Aviv, Moscow, Beijing, and across the Middle East is a simple one: how far are they willing to go? Because once a war reaches a certain level of escalation, it becomes very difficult to stop. And the world may soon discover that this conflict is far more dangerous than anyone originally imagined.